Hello, my name is Mike Brennan. I'm going to demonstrate the custom vendor pay when paid report for you today. I'm going to take you through how it works and compare it against the standard report, comparing the various features and shortcomings of the standard report versus this custom report. Let's first start by running the standard report, which can be found here, and a quick refresh will load the data up. This is telling us that no amounts are due. I'm focused on this area, I just circled in black, where that indicates that no payments have been received from the client, so nothing is due. If I want to find out the details of each particular invoice, I need to click in and out, or I can run it in the detail version by taking off the drill down, and I have all that information available to me. Makes the report a little lengthy and sometimes hard to find the information you're looking for. So the information's there, maybe just a little bit hard to find. So let's put this back into summary version. And now let's run the custom vendor pay when pay report. That's this one here. And when I hit the refresh button on the current due, it tells me, it comes back blank. There's nothing due, which is consistent with what the standard report is telling me. Now, to put this on a consistent basis with the standard report, I want to change the mode it's running into: open vendor invoices, both paid and unpaid by the client. That's kind of an apples to apples comparison with the standard, although you can see it's not producing the same information. There are two invoices on the custom report that are not present on the standard report. This invoice being one, and this invoice being two. And you can see that they have one attribute in common, and that is their WIP status is deferred. The standard pay when pay report is not picking up any of those consultant invoices with a WIP status of deferred. It needs to be associated with a vendor invoice, either a draft or a final, to appear on this report. That would be true of a hold status as well. So now I'm going to receive some cash against one of these invoices, and then we're going to rerun the reports and see how they differ. So the cash is out here on Portland Public Schools. It belongs to this invoice here. I'm just going to receipt it as of today. Click Save. And then let's pull the standard report back over, give it a quick run, and you'll notice that there's a minor change to it, and it's indicating that one report or one invoice is now due and payable. It does not provide any totals in that regard about how much is due or anything along those lines. So you'd have to sort through the report, find the ones that are due, perhaps put a little checkbox next to them, subtotal them on a calculator or an Excel, and put your own control totals on the report. Now we're going to run the custom pay when pay report. We're going to set the mode back to just current due. And now it just brings us up just what's due. And as we look at the canvas of the report and we start to digest the information here, we can see that the report is really divided into two sections: vendor invoice data on the left, client invoice data on the right. Everything about the vendor invoice that's pertinent to the management of this process is here, including the project ID, the vendor invoice date, the vendor invoice number, who the vendor is, the original amount of the invoice, any payments against it, any write-offs against it, and then the current balance outstanding. Over on the right side of the screen is the information that's associated with the client invoice. It's telling us the status is billed, the invoice state is final, here's the invoice number, this was the amount invoiced, the amount received, its status is now paid, and the receipt date. So everything that you want to know about that particular invoice. And if we change that state back to all outstanding invoices, we can see some difference in the data. In this case, we're seeing the state of these two is deferred, the state of these 6 is draft, and the state of this one is final. And of that one that's final, that's the one that's paid. So I'm going to put it back into its current due state. And we're going to queue up some payments for the vendors. That's done through the Manage Vendor Payments interface. And we're just going to find the one invoice and check it for payment. On this screen, we have a control total of what's selected, $1,500. That matches up with our amount that's due of $1,500. So that serves as a control total for us. We don't have to sort through the standard report to find the ones that are due, subtotal it manually, and then compare the totals. It's all provided for us. Now we're going to process a final invoice for project 04107. And we're going to see how the report changes. Then we're going to receive the cash against it and see how the report changes as well. So here's the invoice that I want to finalize. We're going to give it a cutoff date of 9/30. And then we're going to just come in here real quick to make sure there is some consultant activity. And I'm focused on this particular line right here. So I'm going to go up to the entries bucket or button. Come over here to the expense consultant. There's one vendor invoice that belongs to Ajera Architects on there for $12,650. So we're good. We're going to save this and we're going to final print it. We use a date of 9/30. And that invoice is now finalized. So what happens in real life is maybe now we're 2 weeks later and we get some additional invoices in on that project. So we're going to load one of those invoices in. We're going to go to Manage Vendor Invoices. We're going to select BVA as the vendor, give it invoice number 123. We're going to date it 9/30/18. That was the period of performance. On the face of that invoice, it said for services provided through September 30th. They just didn't get it in time before we got the invoice out to the client. And that happens all the time. I'm going to put it on the same phase, and then we'll just use electrical consultant for $1,000. So let's come back to this screen and see what's here now. Now I've got the draft, and back on that draft, I've got WIP that belongs to September, but I've already billed September. So I need to get rid of this WIP. So what I want to do is clear it. I'm going to put a cutoff date in again of 9/30 so that any labor entries that have come on in October do not get swept off in this process. I want to use the same cutoff date as I did for the final invoice that I issued, for the last final invoice that I issued. This is what makes the custom pay run pay report associate this activity with the real invoice that was issued to the client. So I'm just going to put the cutoff date in there. If you want to assign an invoice number, the same one perhaps, that would be fine as well. So the real invoice number, I just need to check on that. I think it was 373. So we can put 00373 in here for reference purposes. And then I need to sign my cutoff date one more time. It looks like it disappeared from me. And now all those attributes are solid there. Then we're just going to click the clear WIP button. In fact, yep, there we go. It says it's going to create a zero invoice for us, which is what we want. It's going to date it 9/30 and 9/30 again. And what this is going to do is going to do two things. This process is going to clear the WIP, which we want gone anyway, for best practices, and it's going to associate that WIP with the prior invoice. So let's go check in with both the reports, both the standard and the custom, and make sure they've got that updated activity. So the activity since we first looked at this report is now this invoice is ready for payment. We've got a new invoice in here from BVA, and I believe it's this invoice which we're about to do a receipt upon. And we're going to watch the disposition of these two invoices to see how they look on the custom report. Here's the results of the custom report, and it's consistent with the standard report. We've got the new invoice here for BVA Group. It indicates it's billed to the client. And then we've got the $11,000 invoice up here indicating it's billed to the client. Now we're going to perform a receipt against that invoice. And that is on project 04107. That's the invoice right there. For reality purposes, we'll make this 1031. And we're going to click Save. Now as we return to the standard report, we remember we were focused on this invoice and this invoice. Both of those were on project 04107, and both were for September services. This one was processed under normal circumstances where the vendor invoice came in before the vendor invoice or before the client invoice was issued, and it's indicating that the payment's received and it's good to pay. This one is indicating it has not been paid. Remember, that one was cleared on a zero invoice, and that's never going to clear from this screen. So that's an issue with the workflow with the standard report. You can't do that workflow process that I suggested, but the only way to get that cleared would be to put it on the following invoice, but that's not matching it up with the related invoice, and the timing is off on that. So let's look at the custom report now and see what it's telling us. Now we're seeing the $11,000 invoice as we should expect, but also on here is the $1,000 invoice from BVA, and it's indicated that it was a trailing cost and its associated invoice is paid, and that was its associated invoice 00373, and it knew that based on the cutoff date right here. So this is where this report can help you with your workflow and make this report work for you in all scenarios, because you can basically reattach your trailing costs to the final invoice that they relate to by clearing the WIP with a cutoff date that's the same as the last final invoice or the final invoice you want it associated with. Now we'll finish this process off. We're going to go mark those invoices for payment. And that was under BVA for 1,000, and then the other one was for, I believe, Ajera for 11,000, and there it is. Again, we're checking our control totals. 13,005 against 13,005. So we are good. Now we're going to pay these invoices. We're just going to pay them with a printed check. We'll use the Chase Bank, and we'll pay them on 10/31/18. Ajera's generating those checks. Did the checks print okay? They did. Do we want to file copy? And we don't. It's saving the paid entries. Now we come back to the pay when pay report. We hit the refresh button under the current due mode, and nothing comes up because those are now marked paid, and they're off the current due version. If I always want to see a complete history of what happened on 04107, I can just refresh that, and it's going to bring me up a complete history of what's taken place on that particular project, sorted by vendor. That's the demo for that report. If you're interested in this report, I encourage you to contact me. Happy to go through it with you again live. I can be reached at mbrennan@unlockthedata.com. Thank you for listening.